So today is lesson 32, obsession classification. So we will study a bit more of obsession, and before we start, I just want to say that obsession is not, or the interference of certain spirits, it's not just something that happens to mediums. It happens to everyone. What happens to mediums, especially those who have a clear, open channel, is that the communication established with the spiritual world is stronger. So this influence can be noticed more than in any other people. So whatever we are going to see today, it can happen to anyone, despite the degree of mediumship that the person may manifest. But as I said before, the exchange when the person is a medium with a clearly open channel is stronger, then the influence of the spirits are felt more than someone whose mediumship is not so clearly open. So before we start, it's important to understand why this happened, how this happened, and the role of the medium's moral influence in this aspect. And then we are going to understand a bit better the types of obsession that have been, presented by Allan Kardec. Once again, we establish degrees and we call them certain names for obsession according to the degree of interference of these spirits in the medium mind. So this is not something that we fall straight into one of the three categories we're going to see, but it can change from one into another and slowly progress if nothing is done in terms of reversing these situations. And also, this is not an extraordinary situation because we are under the interference of spirits all the time. But obsession is a very clear situation where the persistence of one certain spirit or some spirits in the medium is recurrent. So it's happening all the time. The same spirit, the same group of spirits. Kardec, question 226, he asked, does the development of mediumship have any relation to mediums' moral development? And this is a key question. It's not just for mediums, but for everyone, a moral development. That will tell us in what kind of a frequency range we are going to vibrate. And of course, there is a natural phenomenon called resonance. If we meet a source of the same frequency, we enter into a strong exchange. This is a natural phenomenon. And we see this phenomenon very clearly in the case of mental waves. If we are vibrating at a certain wave frequency, we meet someone at the same frequency, we establish a strong connection, a strong exchange. So, and what dictates what kind of frequency the medium has? Its moral state. So the first important advice for anyone, but especially mediums, because they are subject to clear interference from spirit, although all of us are, is to look after his moral progress and to understand the faculty. These are two very important aspects. But to develop morally is very important because it changes the frequency the mediums vibrate. So the answer to that question given by spirit is no, the faculty per se is organic, as has been said before. It's an organic faculty. Our body provides the condition for this faculty to be ostensibly, clearly used. So it is independent of the morality, the faculty itself. However, the same does not apply concerning the use, its use. So how we use the faculty, which can be good or bad according to the medium's character. That's why the medium's character is so important, is the use we make. Sometimes we say, what is a good medium? It's a medium that has very clearly open mediumship channel, or is the medium that has very little mediumship as such, but makes very good use of it. So we have to distinguish one thing from the other: the moral state of the medium and the ostensibly clear channel that exists exchanging the two worlds. So these are two independent things. And following that, there's another point, another question. Why do highly evolved spirits allow persons who are gifted with great mediumship ability and who could do a great deal of good to become instruments of errors? And I bring this question here because we could exchange error to obsession. So why do they allow? And the answer is the same if we are talking about error in general or obsession. Such spirits try to influence them, but when these individuals allow themselves to be drawn onto a path of error, they do not stop them. That is why they use them so reluctantly, for the truth cannot be interpreted with a lie. They are talking about good spirits giving communications to mediums who are morally not advanced or who went into the path of error. So the good spirits, they always allow the best mediums to be deceived sometimes as a lesson, as an exercise of judgment, to discern truth from falsehood. This is very important. If we can apply that to obsession, the cases of obsession, we should always exercise judgment, always, and learn to discern truth from falsehood. It's the same when we join a group here in the physical world. When we join a group, we should be always analyzing the behavior of each and every one in the group, not to discriminate them, but to know that the information they give to us, if we can trust them or if we cannot trust them. It's the same with the spirit, it's the same thing. So, and as they put here, besides, no matter how good mediums may be, they are never perfect, or so perfect that they do not have a weak side that expose them to being attacked. And again, I bring to the context of obsession. Such should serve them as a lesson. So we should always put ourselves, as it's been said so many times, be vigilant all the time, especially regarding our imperfections, because these are the open door to obsession. And then item 227. Even though mediums are merely instruments with regards to the execution, they nevertheless exert a large moral influence because communicating spirits identify with the medium's spirit. For these identification, there must be sympathy between them. We might even say an affinity. This is important, affinity between the medium, or all of us, I would say, but most clearly, a person with a very clear mediumistic channel, and the spirit. So it's not just any spirit that can come and attach him or herself to us and establish this affinity. No, it's in terms of vibration, as I mentioned before. So if mediums, they are morally lacking, less evolved, the spirits huddle around them and are always ready to take place of good spirits. And what do the good spirits do? They'll force us to follow them? No. They'll give us, they'll inspire us, they'll tell us very clearly, bring us messages. But if we don't listen to them, they just, step aside. And we, in this way, we choose to establish this affinity with this not so evolved spirits. So the qualities that attract the preference of good spirits are the ones that we already know, and we should do our utmost to improve in these aspects: in goodness, benevolence, simplicity of heart, love for one's neighbor, and detachment from material things. So this is our daily lesson. If we want to, progress in general, but especially if we have the mediumistic faculty, the channel very clearly open. And the defects, they repel them, are pride, selfishness, envy, jealousy, hate, greed, sensuality, and all the passions that keep humans attached to matter. We have the gospel of Jesus as a guide to exactly do the same, to develop the virtues and rid ourselves from the imperfections. So obsession, what is obsession? Obsession, as we've seen in the previous talk, is the domination of certain spirits that certain spirits may acquire over certain individuals. So they say certain spirits over certain individuals. So there is the condition where there's this affinity for obsession to happen. So the domination is always the work of little evolved spirits who latch on to whomever they can control. So good spirits won't do that. They won't just attach to us, prevent any other spirits from communicating and insisting and trying to convince us all the time, giving us all sorts of messages all the time. No, they'll give us good advice, and it's up to us to accept it, to follow them or not. Now, this is important, that the obsession is always a process involving less evolved spirits. So the good ones never exert any kind of coercion whatsoever. So obsession displays many characteristics as a result of the degree of coercion of the nature of the effect it produces. As I said before, we classify here in 3 types. Although in the Spiritist Review, Kardec, he mentions that perhaps there exists a 4th category, but it's just a way of us to classificate and study it. But as I said before, there isn't a clear transition from one type of obsession to another. So the main varieties of obsession, they are simple obsession, which I would say is the first degree in the process, fascination, and finally subjugation. And of course, each one of these 3 categories has got, particularity. So as I said before, this is a process that is continuous. It's not just, stepping from one into the other, and the transition is very clear. Yeah. Okay. So the first one is simple obsession. It occurs when malevolent spirits impose themselves upon mediums. So the interference against their will is the communications they receive. It's the persistence. It's always that spirit giving communication, insisting. But there isn't clearly, it's not because the medium is receiving this kind of interference that the medium cannot just, rid him or herself from this this kind of situation. So the problem with that is not just that one spirit is forcing his way through the mediumship channel of a particular medium, but also it prevents the medium from communicating with other spirits. So, it's always me. And sometimes when some other spirits are evoked, that very same spirit is there. So this is a kind of a, yellow light, just to show us that there's something wrong And what should we do? Should we look outside for a solution for that? No, we should look inside ourselves. So there's something wrong with the medium, or there is a lesson for the medium to learn. We shouldn't forget that sometimes, as I mentioned in the previous slide, the good spirits, they bring situations for us because we are not perfect, we are not infallible. So they want to bring us lessons as well. So this is one lesson for mediums, that they should change something in order to get away from this situation, which is situation of simple obsession. So no mediums are obsessed by the simple fact of being deceived by a lying spirit. It's not because the spirit came and gave a false communication or deceived the medium that the medium is obsessed. As I said before, simple obsession, the characteristic is the same medium, same spirit, forcing himself or herself through the channel to give communication all the time. So the spirit is there in all situations, even when other spirits are evoked in a mediumship meeting. It consists in the tenacity of a spirit from which the victim cannot break free. Not break free easily, I would say. But yes, it's possible to break free. But it's up to the medium to change his frequency, to break this affinity, because if this is happening, there is an affinity. We saw last week with Elsa the causes of obsession. So we should, check the previous lessons and see that obsession happens because the spirit may be known to us from this or previous life, or the spirit just sees an opportunity to to interfere with the mediumship of someone. And there are some causes for that, and we should try to find it, and we should try to change ourselves in that respect. So simple obsession. So in simple obsessions, the mediums know, this is important, they know perfectly well that they are dealing with a deceptive spirit. So they know there's the spirit comes over and over again, and the medium is perfectly, or in perfect conditions to perceive that. The spirit does not in any way disguise or cloak its evil intentions. So it's a spirit that is there to create disturbances, certain situations, and the spirit doesn't disguise that. He or she is there to cause trouble. So the medium easily recognizes that. So it's an opportunity for the medium to analyze him or herself in terms of moral development, if there's something that needs changing. And also, it's an exercise of virtues, an opportunity to exercise some of the virtues, and also an opportunity for learning. Thus, this form of obsession is only unpleasant and only has the inconvenience of making communication difficult with the serious spirits of those who are fond of. So the medium to receive communication from serious spirits has to make this effort to disconnect, to break this link with his spirit and attach to spirits who are more serious. So we can include in this category cases of physical obsession, like in haunted places. Sometimes someone there with a clear mediumship that is providing the necessary conditions for physical manifestation. This is just one type. And then we see something happening, stones that are cast from nowhere on our roof, and things and noises, and sometimes there are some obstinate manifestations of certain spirits. So they produce these raps, these other sounds, that sometimes materialization in a persistent form. This can be seen as a kind of simple obsession. It's the same spirit there doing that all the time. The second type is fascination. So we've moved to a different situation now. It has more serious consequences. Why is that? Because it refers to a delusion created directly by a spirit in the thought of a medium, which in certain manner paralyzes his or her capacity to judge. This is very important. Paralyze the capacity to judge, the quality of the communications. We see that in our social exchange. Sometimes we meet someone who for us is God on earth. Oh, that person. Oh, he or she is marvelous. Oh, so whatever that person does for us is wonderful. We can't see, we lose sometimes this capacity to judge and see, wow, that doesn't sound right. Why am I, creating these, how do I say, perception of that person as a marvelous person. And, we don't see that the person is doing things that are not correct. But in this case, in Fascination, the spirit on purpose tried to disguise his intention. So we get in this situation where we lose our capacity to judge the quality of the communication. We clearly see that, our pride is involved in this situation, sometimes our selfishness. So we think that, I only receive good communication from good. No, that spirit, it's marvelous. His messages or her messages are wonderful. That's why Kardec says, I would rather reject 99 truths than accept one falsity, meaning that analyze everything. It's not because it came from A, B, or C that we should accept and say, no, if it is signed by that spirit, I accept, I believe it's true, full stop. No. We should never lose the capacity to judge. Never. If it is a good spirit, the spirit will say, very good, you've learned the lesson. Judge every word that I've put on this message, including, your capacity to express my ideas through your mediumship. But if it is an evil spirit, the spirit will get angry or will say, oh, you don't trust me, you don't deserve my assistance or something like that. So good spirits will never find, that putting doubts on the quality of the message as something negative. On the contrary. So the delusion can reach the point where it causes them to consider the most ridiculous language as sublime. Something that, makes no sense, a sometimes very rude language, and the medium cannot see that. That's why they say, loses the capacity to judge. The most refined, educated, and otherwise intelligent individuals are not at all exempt from this kind of delusion. So we can't just say, oh, it is because the person hasn't got much education or, is not intellectually that advanced or whatever. No, it can happen to anyone. So we should always be on guard. It doesn't matter what. We should always be on guard regarding this analysis of what we receive as mediums. So the consequences of fascination are very serious. Thanks to the delusion that results from it, these spirits, they guide the victims whom they have managed to dominate as if they were blind. The person is taken as if the person was blind, as if he was a child that needs an adult to guide, to say what to do. So the medium finds him or herself in this situation. So the spirits, they can lead the medium to accept the most absurd doctrines and erroneous theories as being the sole expression of truth. Moreover, they can incite them to foolish, compromising, and even dangerous acts. As I said before, the medium no longer knows what he or she is doing, but accepts that as something good, as the truth. So the difference between simple obsession and fascination. The spirits who produce these two types must differ from each other in character. In the former, in simple obsession, spirits who attach themselves to mediums only inconvenience them by their tenacity, from which the medium tries to break free, as it's been mentioned before. But in the latter, in order to achieve their purposes, such spirits must be skillful. So they're very skillful, very cunning, so deeply hypocritical, since they can only succeed at being deceptive if they impose themselves by wearing a mask and putting on a false appearance of virtue. So they disguise themselves. They sometimes use nice words. They pretend to be, they delude the medium that they are giving a wonderful message because they've mentioned charity, love, and so on. But when we read it with, very wide open eyes, clear mind, we'll see that, well, there's something wrong here. As I said before, Kardec said, I'd rather reject 99 truths than accept one falsity, because the truth will come time after time, despite our accepting it or not. But if we accept one falsity, we may get into a situation that is very difficult to break free in the future. Grand words such as charity, humility, love for God serve as their calling card, but through it all shine signs of how little evolved they are. They betray themselves. Sometimes, if we look very clearly, we see that they betray themselves, because what they're expressing doesn't come from the heart. It comes from, as they said before, a very cunning spirit. That is why these spirits dread, more than anything else, persons who see things clearly. As I said before, if the message comes from a good spirit, the good spirit will be happy when we clearly analyze its content and sometimes doubt it. It's part of it. But one of these spirits in the situation of fascination won't accept that. So their tactic is nearly always that of inspiring their mediums to avoid whoever might open their eyes. So they run from that, all the time, because they know they will be identified. And the last one is subjugation. So this is the most serious degree of obsession. In this case, it's not only that the medium loses its mental capacity of clearly see things, of judge things, but in this case, there is a stronger control from the spirit, to the point that the spirit can even manipulate the body of the medium, forcing the medium to do things he wouldn't do it otherwise. So a constriction that causes its victim's will to become paralyzed. So it's not just the awareness, is the will that becomes paralyzed, making them act in spite of themselves. In other words, they find themselves under true bondage. So subjugation can be either mental or physical. As I said before, it can be just on the level of ideas, of behavior, or it can actually force the medium to do something physical terms. So in the former, those who are subjugated are led to make frequently absurd and compromising decisions, which under a kind of delusion, they regard as sane. It is a type of fascination. In the latter, the spirit acts upon the physical organs to produce involuntary movements, forces the medium to kneel down, for instance. And the medium doesn't want it, but it does. Or to say something or to do something that the medium doesn't want to do, but it's forced to, because the control of the spirit is so great. The spirit doesn't take the body as such, because there's always the medium as the intermediary. But the control under the medium's mind is so strong that the medium accepts these commands from the subjugating spirit. In writing mediums, it produces an incessant need to write, even at inopportune times. So the medium is always writing, whatever the medium is, just take whatever. And it's interesting. I advise you to read chapter 23 of the Medium's book. And there are some interesting cases there. A medium who would write on doors because he had no paper, nothing. He was just in the street and felt this urge to write. So it's something that has no control. And corporeal subjugation sometimes goes so far as to lead the medium to commit the most ridiculous acts. There's a case of this guy who he went down on his knees and asked a girl to marry her, and he didn't want anything with her, but the spirit forced the medium to do that, to ask her to marry him. And it's there in the medium's book. So this is what I had prepared for today. I advise you to read the medium's book, as I said, chapters 22, with that introduction, the previous, the first slides I showed you, telling the importance of the medium's moral qualities for the communication. For anything else, as I say, it's not just a particular situation for mediums, but for all of us. The need that we have to morally improve ourselves. We won't change overnight completely, but we have to fight against our imperfections all the time. It's been said that a good spiritist is not the one that is perfect, but is the one that is always struggling to get to perfection. So that is it. If we have questions, I'll be very happy to answer them.
Munir, very nice indeed. There are 2 comments in the chat, if you read, because they are very nice.
Okay, I'll just stop.
And one question as well.
Okay, I'll just stop the sharing the slide.
So if you stop the slide, I stop recording. Okay, it's okay.
No, it's okay. Yeah, no problem. It's just that I want to see the chat. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Elsa says, simple obsession is almost in every one of us, isn't it? Yes. I mean, but not that we are under the influence of spirits who are always trying to disturb us, but the same spirit or the same group of spirits. This is what allows us to call it simple obsession. But yes, we are, as it's been said, always affected by the spirits. We are spirits. We exchange mental waves, and we are constantly being bombarded, as it were, by the spirits who are around us. But as I said before, it's up to us to decide with whom we are going to develop this affinity through our moral development. Let me see here from Charles. I would comment that fascination is nowadays not only happening from discarnated spirits to medium. It happens also through manipulation, fake news, conspiracy theories, etc. So Kardec advises extremely actual. Yes, I mentioned this, Charles. I mentioned this case that sometimes we get fascinated by incarnate people and we can't see the wrongs that the person does because we lost our capacity to judge. And we are exposed to these artificial situations through fake news, manipulation of information. Sometimes we don't need, the person doesn't need to lie to us. It's just, hides the information that is not, I don't want you to, or the information I don't want to get to you. And I just tell you part of the truth. If I'm doing that, I'm manipulating the situation. So you lose the capacity to judge with all the necessary information. So your judgment is distorted, and then create an artificial situation. You see me, oh, that guy is, oh, he's doing a marvelous job. He's wonderful. I'll do whatever he asks. You know, we've seen situations like that in history where people were, lost their capacity of seeing the wrongs that someone, especially political leaders and religious leaders and whatever, were doing.
So it's exactly a very similar mechanism which is happening, no?
Yeah.
And we are daily faced to these things with all the social media and all this speedy information that we are flooded every day. So it needs always this filtering from us, huh? Judgment, common sense. It's a Socratic filter. Huh? Is it true? Is it good? And is it useful for the moment? And if the answer on any of these three questions is no, put it aside and take it with care. No?
Yeah, and we should always be careful. If we react, we should always act. We shouldn't react. When we react, we are actually provoked by a situation and information, whatever. But then we should analyze, as Charles said, we use the Socratic filter, and then we act if necessary. So it's something conscious, something we have articulated in our mind. And we could ask, oh, why are the good spirits allowing us to experience this moment in the planet? Well, it's an exercise. If it's hard for us with fake news from people we know, from situations we see, we follow every day, can you imagine about the spirit that comes and tells us, well, you know, when we return to the spirit world, it's like this, it's like that, or your world is going to turn into this, into that. You know, we have the opportunity to develop this.
We learn from the mistakes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There is a question from Faye.
Yeah, I got to that. Taking that the spirit may show a degree of intellectual refinement and yet be deceptive, how can a medium tell the difference or be reassured of how reliable communication or spirits actually is? My first advice, Faye, is to share whatever we get from spirit. We shouldn't keep it to ourselves. When we keep it to ourselves, we may be under this situation of losing our capacity to fully analyze the content. When we share, and that's why a mediumship group is important, we should be humble to accept other people's opinion. If we are open to that, oh, I want to, everyone should look at the message and see perhaps someone there who is a medium for irradiation, has a very clear mediumistic channel, is under less interference and can point out things we are not seeing in our message. So, and forget, it's not our message, actually. We are the channel. We shouldn't be embarrassed to show a message that in a very simple language. It's almost like something written by someone who is not intellectually that advanced, or because it's not ours. We shouldn't be neither proud nor ashamed of the message that we get. We should be ashamed of our, how would I say, resistance to morally develop ourselves. This is something we can do, morally develop ourselves. But the quality of the message is not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to be a good channel. Once we are a good channel, the communication belongs to the spirit. The message is from the spirit. So we shouldn't take personally the criticism, or we shouldn't take personally the beauty of the message as being ours. Wow, I'm an enlightened spirit because a good spirit gave a beautiful communication. No, we should be humble and say, I am a channel. And I share with as many people in my group as possible, because people in the group, a mediumship group, they know the situation, they know the circumstances, they know us. And when we have this kind of affinity within the group, each opinion is important, because then we can compose a clear picture. If there is one piece missing of the jigsaw, it doesn't compromise the whole picture. We know there's a piece there missing, because that day their opinion wasn't very adequate, or whatever, the person who wasn't in good condition, but or we couldn't judge properly the message we've been the channel of. But there's always composition with other people's opinion. That's the best way I know to assure that the messages are reliable or not.
Munir, eu acho que tem mais uma pergunta da Rihanna. Sorry, I was speaking Portuguese. There's one more question from Rihanna, and after that, I think we have questions 42, okay?
Yeah, because from now on, our practice lasts for 25 minutes. It's 5 minutes, I think. Yeah, Rihanna, Munir, can we be responsible for someone being obsessed through our obsession by them? I think, I mean, we are always responsible for what the situation we can. I don't know if I understood that question very clearly. Can we be responsible for someone being obsessed through our obsession by them? Yes, if we are obsessed by them, yes. I mean, we shouldn't be obsessed by anyone or anything as such in terms of obsession here. Something that, you know, is always taking whatever, you know, some people, whatever they do, they bring, you know, the idea of someone. Oh, so-and-so would do that. Oh, so-and-so would do like this. Oh, so-and-so would tell me to do this way or that. I mean, we shouldn't be obsessed by anything or anyone, because sometimes we're obsessed by things as well in terms that we are creating this situation, not that, you know, that particular object or place or whatever is creating that on us. But we should always see us, yes, as responsible if there's something we can do and we are not doing. And as I said before, any type of obsession we should actually try to avoid. But anything, we sometimes say, oh, he's obsessed by ice cream. We know that is not good. It's not good. You can, you know, you can like it, but be obsessed. That means you're always, all the time, taking it or having it, or, you know, seeing as if you were there or whatever. And this situation actually distracts us. And whatever distracts us is not good, because we should balance things in life. And in the case of ice cream is very good, it's wonderful, but you shouldn't take it all the time. Can you imagine? Instead of having lunch, you have ice cream. Instead of having, you know, the afternoon tea, you have ice cream. So this is what I would say, you know, an obsession for ice cream. And we know it's not good in the most simple way that, you know, you're always taking the same food, and we should, you know, have a very healthy diet and very, how they say, composed by different types of food. Can you imagine in terms of ideas, in terms of influence?
Last one, Munir, because I have to go, but it's a tiny.
Let me see. Oh, okay. Another symptoms of obsession can be not being able to sleep at night, and or having respective thoughts that we can get rid of. Well, it may be an indication, because, you know, as I said before, always the influence of spirits. The obsession in the spiritist context is one particular spirit or one particular group of spirits constantly there, making the point, disturbing. And of course, you can have a situation like that. You can't sleep because, you know, that spirit is disturbing you, or that group of spirits is disturbing you, your thoughts and everything. But in the case here, we were talking about a simple obsession. That spirit is always next to us, is always bombarding us with that idea. So it's a persistent situation. And as I said before, Tami, it can create a situation where you can't sleep. Yeah, but you can have other causes also for not sleeping. What we should do is this filter. Read chapter 23 and then see if we fall into one of these categories as it's been described. And in this case, they are talking also about the obsession in mediums, and that prevent the medium from working. So it receives always a communication from the same spirit all the time. So there isn't room for any other spirit, any other type of communication. So in this restricted way of the mediumship work, it is the spirit that doesn't give room for other spirits to give communication, and is constantly doing it. But as I said before, we are all subject to obsession, or even if our mediumship is not very clearly ostensive.
So I think Munir, we stop with the questions for next week.
Okay.
Tania will be here next week to answer the questions.